Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar about Prodependence. I'm happy to be here. My name's Kim Buck. For those of you who are maybe new to this webinar today, I'm in Arizona. I work at an agency and work a lot with addiction and partners and loved ones who are dealing with addiction and other mental illness. So this topic is near and dear to me, and both personally and professionally. So I'm would encourage you, if you have questions or thoughts or comments, please pipe in. I love interaction. I don't love talking and lecturing, but I'll do my best to answer questions and hopefully make this as interactive as possible. And Tammy will help us help with those questions and get those to me. So in the meantime, if you guys are familiar or aren't familiar, Prodependence is Dr. Rob's book that came out last fall. He and I are working on a workbook we're hoping to publish in the spring of 2020. It's in the works, so we're excited about that. So we'll have some application for those of you who would like, well, what do I do? Now I know, what do I do? And how do I apply Prodependence to my life, to my relationships? What does it mean for me? So hopefully we will be crossing that bridge very soon. And until then, hopefully this will be one of those bridges that we can help bridge some of that information, and I can maybe give you some information that will be helpful. So biggest piece to know about Prodependence is it came out of a need to change an old model that we've been using a long time. Most of you are familiar with the codependent model, which really was all we had for a long time, and in a lot of ways very useful and helpful, and in a lot of ways very hurtful and unhelpful. Actually sometimes caused more trauma because it sort of wanted to give the partner and the loved one a little bit of blame and responsibility for the breakdown in the relationship. And Prodependence doesn't say that you don't have your part in, or a partner doesn't have their part in a relationship. For sure, it takes two to tango, as they say, but it doesn't pathologize that. It doesn't make that an illness or a sickness, or really those things happen because I'm in a relationship with an addict most often. Some of the unhealthy thought patterns and behavior patterns that might crop up. So I want to talk maybe a little bit today. I thought I'd just throw out some ideas, and maybe this will help with conversation about the difference in the internal dialogue sometimes that the internal dialogue that we want to talk about with Prodependence, and how different it is from old dialogue. Old dialogue meaning codependent dialogue, which in that internal voice might say something like, "What? I'm such an idiot. Like, why would I be with this person? And if I was my own best friend, I would tell her to leave him, or I would kick my kid out of the house, or I would never talk to him until he stops using drugs, or, you know, I'm just going to let my husband take care of him. I'm just going to detach, and I'm going to do me, and he's going to do him." And those are some of the old kind of dialogue around codependency, and sometimes shame, of course, that comes up in relationship too. But the old one used to say things like, put the addict over there, like detach, love them, but detach yourself. And since the codependent model came out, and in the last several years, we've learned the importance of attachment. And we actually know that most addictions stem in an attachment disorder. So to tell somebody to detach just causes oftentimes more wounding, because that's the original wound, is attachment. So that being said, some of you might be panicking and being like, well, yeah, but I don't want to be in the mess. You know, I don't want to be in all that crisis. It's too hard for me. Detaching makes it easier. So I think we're just going to change some of the language and some of the ways that we see our relationship with our struggling loved one, with somebody who's struggling with mental illness or addiction. So what I frequently will say from a prodependent perspective to clients and even family and friends is, prodependence says, hold on to the parts of the relationship that are healthy, or maybe that are good, or that are worth saving, might be another way to say it. What do we have in common? Why did we fall in love in the first place? What investments have we made to this relationship that makes it worth saving or worth fighting for, at least for now? And that's not to say that I have to stay in the relationship. It's not to say that the relationship is savable. We don't know that, you know. A lot of times that just depends on, you know, if the addict or the other person decides to do what they need to do to get healthy and become a safer person or not. I will warn a lot of you maybe who are in a relationship, getting healthy yourself sometimes rocks the boat more. As I start to, you know, take care of myself and set boundaries and become a little more stable and grounded, and maybe, you know, respond in a more prodependent way. I love you, but, you know, here's what I can and can't tolerate. That probably, if the addict's not in a healthy place, it will probably really stir up some drama. And so, so that can be painful. So I just kind of want to put out that warning. And some of you probably have experienced that in your relationship. In the book, Dr. Rob talks about kind of what would the internal dialogue look like from a prodependent lens? What are some of the internal things that I might say? So, or a partner or a family member of an addict. And so I just kind of want to go through a couple of these. I think it will give you guys a lens to kind of see the difference in the verbiage than what I was saying before from codependency. One thing is, instead of I'm an idiot for marrying this person and staying with this person, might be an example, or I'm sick, or there's something wrong with me. Maybe he says in here, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true that I'm with the wrong person and that's why I'm unhappy. You know, maybe it's not true, sorry, that I'm partnered with the wrong person and that's why I'm unhappy. Maybe that's not true. Maybe this is the right person. Maybe they just went off course. They went off course in their life in some way. Maybe it's not true that I'm doomed to only spend time with losers. You see where shame kind of creeps up in there, like, you know, this feeling that I have, I'm doomed to be in a bad relationship, or I'm doomed to be in this terrible situation, because maybe it's not so much about me. That's the key to prodependence. I have a role to play in this relationship, but maybe this addiction really isn't about me. Maybe if I approach my loved one differently, as I seek growth on my part, he or she will choose to grow with me. So there's an interesting way to look at it. If I approach them in a healthier way, or approach them with boundaries, or approach them with a more balanced look at our relationship while taking care of myself, there's a possibility that they'll choose to grow with me instead of fight me. And maybe they won't. You know, that's one of those risks. Another thought in here was maybe the attachment I feel to my addictive loved one is not crazy or unhealthy. So how often maybe do partners or family members say that I must be crazy? I must be the most unhealthy person in the world. Or maybe they've been told that by somebody else, maybe by somebody who's supposed to be supporting them, or, you know, and I mean, the proposal here for prodependence is maybe you're not crazy or unhealthy at all. Maybe you fell in love or birthed this child or whatever. You love them because they're one of your people, because you love them. You love them because you love them. You love them because they're one of your people. And that doesn't have to be crazy. My behavior might not be super healthy, but I'm not crazy. Maybe I'm not messed up to the point where I can never hope for better than what I've got. Again, maybe this isn't about me. Maybe this person that I'm with went off course, made decisions that has caused damage, you know, to the relationship, to their life, to my life. But maybe it's not because I'm messed up. Maybe I am still worth loving and I have value and there's nothing wrong with me because I love somebody who's struggling. I'm just a loving person trying to help somebody else that I love. So those are some internal kind of thoughts to kind of challenge maybe old thoughts that there's something wrong with me, because I think as partners and family members, sometimes we want to make it, at least if it's my fault, it's somebody's fault, and then I can somehow fix it. And the truth is, there's nothing anybody can do to fix someone who's got an addiction. They can love, they can invite, they can, interact in healthy ways. They can mentor healthy behavior. They can, do that, but they can't make somebody do anything. Therefore, they can't make them an addict or make them worse, right? We don't have that kind of control and power. Any thoughts or questions, maybe?
I do. I was thinking I would love to have you elaborate a little bit on attachment disorder, because like we throw out these terms and I'm going like, like my spouse is married to me. They're attached to me. We've got kids. They're attached. They've got so it's different with an attachment disorder. How do look and go, oh, that person has an attachment disorder?
Right. That's such a good question. And like I said, that's kind of one of the newer pieces of research to addiction that we have had over the last several years. Attachment disorder, or at least an attachment wound that is usually present in an addicted person, and even non-addicted people, by the way. If you are in a relationship to somebody who has betrayed your trust, that's probably created an attachment wound in that relationship. Meaning somebody that I trusted, that I had securely trusted and attached myself to emotionally, physically, sexually, betrayed that trust, it's going to create a wound there. And now I don't have that secure attachment anymore. Those same things happen sometimes in the growing up years and it might not be obvious either. Attachment wounds happen. Maybe I really had a need for more connection with a father who traveled for work all the time. And I just didn't get that. My attachment didn't kind of solidify itself. So then I take that sometimes into other relationships as I grow. And my lack of trust or my fear of trust comes up in some relationships. Sometimes it doesn't even show up that way. Sometimes it mirrors, like all of a sudden I have a betrayal wound that creates this attachment, this attachment wound. And it's reminiscent of a feeling that I've had earlier in my life or in other situations. Addicts typically, that attachment wounding can happen early when they're young. It can also happen later in life where, for whatever reason, they felt rejection, they felt neglect, they felt alone, and sometimes they isolate themselves and create attachment wounds. They don't actually let people in to their life, and addiction is notorious for that. Isolation and being alone is a notorious characteristic of addiction. And so we can actually either create or exacerbate an attachment that's already there. And attachment's important because we need that for survival. There's been research since forever about that. We have to have secure attachment to survive and be balanced and healthy in the world. And when we don't get that, that creates can stir up all sorts of problems, but it can also be healed. So that's the crazy part. So it can be healed in a marriage, it can be healed in a family, but it can be healed individually and in a person. This is why AA works, or 12-step, or support groups for cancer, for any of that. It works because suddenly I'm not alone. I have other people who know this struggle that I can lean on, I can trust, I can start to practice attachment. So we're wired for pair bonding, we're wired for connection, we're wired for attachment. This is why it hurts so dang much when somebody wounds that part of us and wounds that connection. That's really where that pain is coming from, is you were my person. You were the person I leaned on and promised to stay. And I put all of that faith and hope and trust in you. And now I'm kind of left, floating, trying to figure out, now where do I plant my feet? Who do I trust now? I hope that answered that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And I was thinking, and how risky it has to feel. Like, who do I trust now? If everybody who if somebody who I really, really love did this, and I can feel this way, then how can other people hurt me too? So it has to be really scary to be willing to go, okay, I'm going to try trusting this person because they could turn around and thing. We've seen that. I think one of the hardest things, or it's hardest for me to hear, is when the affair partner is like the best friend. And I was like, wow, that's the double whammy of it's the person who I love and my person who's my best friend or sister or whatever, using male addict, female partner, and not to just for pronoun ease, but I think of that. I know Dr. Rob has talked about how the anonymous sex, where somebody goes off to another town and sees prostitutes, and it's devastating to the partner, and I'm not taking away one iota from that, but it just feels like it's an extra layer of betrayal when it's somebody that's in your circle. So so challenging.
Well, and for the addict, I'm trying to get attachment in a maladaptive or an unhealthy or a not useful way. So I can't attach if I'm looking at pornography, for instance, or if I'm drinking excessively, or I'm trying to connect with something. Remember, I've got these wires that need connection, and I am trying to connect, but that something can't ever be reciprocal. Right? It's a one-way street, and attachment takes reciprocity. It takes back and forth. You attach to me, I attach to you. It can't be a one-way street. So if I'm looking at a screen of people, or I'm seeing a prostitute, they can't give me attachment. They're not there for that. They're there for intensity, not intimacy. And so it's going to create intensity and a high or a rush, but it's not going to give you the intimacy which leads to secure attachment. Intimacy means complete honesty and openness and like loyalty and all those elements of that exists in intimacy. Open communication and long term, like stick with me, stick by me, like good, bad, and otherwise. Like that doesn't happen with a prostitute. You pay them and you go home or whatever. So that's why it's maladaptive. It's like a bird running into a window thinking, oh, there it is, and I see what I want on the other side, but I keep knocking myself out, right? But my brain chemistry is wired because I create that intensity to keep hitting the window until I realize I got to stop hitting the window long enough and put some people around me that can support me, that I can start to attach to, and they can tell me, hey, it's a window. It'll always be a window, and you're always going to hurt yourself if you do that, and the people you love. So come to me, like, let me hold some space for you and help you learn how to attach. I get you. I have the same struggle or whatever. So rebuilding attachment is a thing. It's really important.
I appreciated, the changing of the messages too. It's really easy for me, especially if I'm in a vulnerable state, to fall back into those negative messages. I've learned, I go, oh, that one was from my childhood of, my dad was, he would say he's a dumb dill pickle, and so, but like I internalized that I'm such an idiot, and I've had to learn to reframe it and go, well, that wasn't my best choice in whatever, but that doesn't mean I'm an idiot, so taking the behavior away from the message about my core belief in myself has been a process, but so helpful, and now I can interrupt it myself. But for a long time, I needed people. So go to what you're saying is, find people that are supportive and going, hey, I've gotcha. Don't fly into the window. It's like, to go, no, you're not an idiot. It's, was that the best choice you ever made? Probably not. But you know what? We're human and whatever. And to help normalize and regulate is really important. I think, you're talking about myself, and I wonder, and I know you mean this too, but I don't to think we're pathologizing partners. It's really, like you talked about, healthy boundaries. Am I doing things that take care of myself? Because it's really easy to fall into a trap. All the focus is on the addict, and it's the crisis, and Dr. Rob talks about it in Prodependent. It's a crisis. So I think what you were talking about was doing healthy things for myself despite what is going on in the chaos. Because I know the codependency model is, so you're sick. I've heard it. The betrayed partner is sicker than the addict. Like, is so not so healthy from a point of being able to choose to make choices that are good for me, good for the relationship. All of those things. I just wanted to point that out, I think.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. That's what I meant. And no, there's no pathology in getting hurt. It's just, you're hurt. And it is a crisis. And it feels crazy because it's a crisis. Like if you are experiencing betrayal or fear around, somebody you love who is failing or struggling with something like this, it's like being in a tornado. It really is. And that doesn't mean you came to it that way. And it doesn't mean that because you're in it, there's something wrong with you any more than somebody who's literally caught in a tornado. Like, you are just trying to find shelter. And so, but we want to make sure that the healing journey is, not pathologized, but it's just that now I've got this hurt and this wound. Now what do I do? Where do I go from here? And not looking at it from disease, just looking at it from hurt. And we're human. So when we lose our attachments, we're going to hurt. We just are. And addicts, the people we love, have the same hurt. We just sometimes don't know how to go about getting, it's kind of a thorny path trying to figure out how to reconnect, if I want to reconnect at all.
Yes, which is always ultimately the choice. But I always encourage people, even if they do decide to separate, to find, to not have it be a reaction. So like, you did this, so I'm leaving, because I think you carry, that wound with you forward. Whereas if you give it some space to heal, and then you go, okay, we really aren't meant to be together, but at least it's on from a different place than the, you betrayed me, I hate you, I'm leaving. So.
Right. Because decisions are never, usually they're not the right decision, or they will be the wrong decision if we try and make them in a crisis. So I love the idea. If it's a good idea today, it'll be a good idea tomorrow. Like,
yes.
It's kind of, it doesn't mean you can't and you should stay. And it doesn't mean anything. All it means is, let me pull myself together, take a deep breath, ground myself, get some support so I can make that decision from the most grounded place possible, which will still feel like crisis, just so you know.
Yeah.
But it won't be like the wind. It's like now I just see the aftermath. It's not like I'm in the middle of the tornado, right? I can just go, okay, what pieces, where do I start? And I'm not going to make any big decisions. I might need space. I might need a lot of things, but I don't have to make any long-term decisions when I'm in the middle of the storm. So yeah, absolutely.
We've got some questions and comments. So I'm going to start with using the bird flying into the window analogy. If you were taught all your life that the window is the door, if you try hard enough, then you'll probably need guidance to actually be able to differentiate a door from a window. So true.
So true. Yeah, because it's repetitive, right? It's something that's just like unwinding those belief systems, whatever they are, that aren't healthy. It just, you're right. It's literally a brain rewire. It's like, that's not what I thought it was. I thought it was. And your brain will start to buy into your behavior, right? And it will create those neural pathways, as unhelpful as they may be, that will create that. But the brain is a beautiful thing that can be rewired. Takes some effort, but it can be rewired.
But getting some support that goes, no, that,
yes.
Let's look at it from a different standpoint. No, it really is, glass.
Get away from the window. Like, get away from the window. Come over.
It's not even an open window. It's like glass. So yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so here's one for you. My partner has begun recovery. That's great. He's a history of lying to therapists. That's typical, but I'm hopeful this time will be different. Insanity, question mark, question mark. How involved can or should I be in his treatment? Therapists, accountability partners, etc. I'm not sure how to be reassured this time will be different.
That's a great question. So begun recovery, I guess, so you've been through this a few times, but maybe your partner, this is the first time that maybe he or she has taken actual action to do recovery. I want to validate, first of all, your trust probably is really low. If you've been down this road several times, you probably are like, meh. I think my thoughts, the thoughts that are popping up in my head are more about watching action. I always say trust is built with good behavior that's observable over time. Not just words. Words are pretty cheap at this point. So I would really be watching and using your gut, which is something that's really hard. I think when you've been in a relationship where addiction's been an ongoing battle, with a partner or loved one, sometimes it's hard to trust your gut because you thought you knew, but you were told otherwise. And because that's the craziness of addiction. That's the throwing you off this trail and all that kind of stuff. So how involved should you be in his treatment? That's kind of a loaded question because I think that's going to vary from person to person just a little bit. I think you should be as involved as you feel comfortable. And mostly I want to say his therapy, his recovery is his recovery, or her. I'm sorry, I don't know.
It's a him. It's
Okay.
the addict. Yeah.
I want to make sure. So his recovery is his recovery. And in my experience, the more you can sort of let go of controlling that, the more accountability and responsibility that is placed on the struggling person to kind of take the initiative in a lot of ways to work on their stuff, the better the outcome. So my encouragement would be your involvement should be more about what you need, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what your wants are, what boundaries that you need to have in the relationship. And it doesn't mean you can't love and support and listen to the degree you feel comfortable, to him and what he's going through. But it's really tempting to want to, in the efforts to help. So this is that piece where we say, okay, so how can I help in the most helpful way? What's really helpful and what's me calming down some of my anxieties? But it really it stirs me up too, For instance, you may have a temptation to ask questions about what you're doing in therapy, or have you called your sponsor, or have you set up an appointment with so-and-so, or have you got to your fourth step, or those might be things you want to say, and you can say them, but sometimes it's helpful to just like pump the brakes a little bit and check that in and figure out, why am I saying it? Am I saying it because I really need to know for my own safety and security, or am I saying it because I really want this person not to ever have a slip again, or I want them to get it? That's where sometimes we can steer wrong in relationships, and it can cause more problems. So how involved is going to be, again, up to you, how you feel and what you need. For long-term recovery, yes, he will. I don't know what the actual addiction is, but most ongoing long-term addictions will need a combination of a lot of things. It will need good therapy. It will need support and accountability, as you mentioned in your question, which can look like a 12-step group or support group of some kind that works for them. It will need structure. It will need, because addicted life is very chaotic. So such a big piece of recovery is establishing structure. So you might see him start to do things he hasn't done before, which would be, just basic take care of myself stuff that I've been letting go because I've been serving my addiction for so long. And the biggest piece is be honest about how you feel with your partner. And if he can't tolerate it, your husband or spouse or the addicted loved one, if he can't tolerate it, then you may have to, again, get that support system around you that you can process those feelings. Let him know what's going on for you and what you need and what's okay and what's not okay. And try your very, very best to kind of let him step up the best he can and do the work. And it's hard work. It's hard work, and it's not quick. You know, brains don't rewire quickly, unfortunately, but they do rewire. So that would be my best answer.
Yeah, and I think that's all really helpful. One of the things I was thinking about too is I don't hear you indicating that you have support, and you know, Kim is, you know, works with lots and lots of partners, and there's really so much value in getting support from a therapist that understands, you know, working with betrayed partners. But even, you know, she's got therapy groups, and that means there's more betrayed partners that are all talking together. Now we have online resources on this site on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, including multiple drop-in groups for partners in a prodependent, you know, alignment, where you can get support, and obviously this webinar and others. But you know, would love to have you have support in all of this, because one of the things that, you know, like it feels a little bit of like, you know, how involved can I or should I get in his treatment? I don't want you to take responsibility for his recovery. I get a lot of questions and comments, you know, from partners going like, you know, I don't want to do this because I'm afraid it will make him relapse or whatever. Like, and you know, we talk often about there's nothing you can do or not do that will make him relapse. He gets to choose that, you know, once he gets into recovery. Now, to Kim's point about, you know, what does therapy look like for him? You know, it may be working with a therapist once a week, you know, is enough in conjunction with some 12-step meetings and the online resources on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, etc. But for some, they need a higher level of care. So for example, Seeking Integrity Los Angeles has a 3-day workshop for men that gives them a little foundation, you know, to get going. But then the real treatment program is a 14-day intensive program that really gives them a foundation. Now, can you get there? Sure. But like in a weekly therapy session, you know, it'll take 12 to 24 months, you know, because it's, you know, it's this longer elongation of the, you know, of getting to the bottom of stuff. So like we were talking about earlier, it's attachment disorder. Well, you don't figure that out, you know, even on day 3 of treatment, you know. So there's so many components and there's so many different ways to do this. And each of us in recovery kind of gets to discover what's going to work for us. I was in my 12-step meeting yesterday, and this woman and I, and we were exactly opposite on this one particular topic, and I cracked up, and it's like, and it works for both of us. So that doesn't mean that she's right and I'm wrong or the opposite. It, you know, but you know, it's finding what will work for each of us. And there is a foundation, there is, you know, support, and there are things that, you know, that those of us in recovery kind of universally do in order to get reprieve from the addiction. But I really want to make sure that you're getting support for you in all of this, because it's really, you know, it's a trauma. You know, we talk about, you know, you know, discovery is a trauma, and you're coping with a crisis, and, you know, all of this stuff. And so, you know, hope you're getting support. But is it insanity? No. Is it scary? Yeah. It's, you know, because you don't know, and he's earned no right to trust yet. Like Kim said, it's what is he doing? Out of the Doghouse, one of the books that Dr. Rob wrote, he talks about doing things that will rebuild trust. You know, if you say you're going to be home at 5:27, don't come home at 5:30, you know, I mean, whatever, you know, if you're going to take out the trash, don't lie about it, you know, whatever. Don't, you know, do what you're going to, you know, what you say you're going to do. Is he going to do it perfectly? Heck no. It's a process. So
I would say too, thank you, Tammy. I think too, like you said in the question, I think you said, how will I know, or how I'd be reassured that this time's different than all the other times? Unfortunately, you probably won't have that for some time, and that's hard. That right there is just a whole little package of pain. So get that support Tammy was talking about, with other people who understand what it feels like to be in that limbo place where I want to know, but I have no yet. He hasn't built kind of that foundation of trust that I need. And so you probably won't. And there'll be probably parts of you that will be like, oh, here we go again. And, you know, you'll probably see old little behaviors pop up. That doesn't mean he's not in recovery or working, but that will be pretty activating to your fear sometimes. So you'll need places to go with that. He may or may not be able to listen and be helpful. And he may, but that's his goal, is to get there if he's in honest recovery. But until then, that's where good support can fill in those gaps while you wait for that reassurance. And with hard work, it comes eventually. And eventually you won't need reassurance from him. It'll internally just happen. You'll just be able to see and witness things that will just confirm to you that I think that's true. And that's all ultimately that trust is all anybody has to offer, and if it's betrayed, I often say, if you've been through this process of healing before and or several times, that you'll navigate your way. It's just, am I willing to take the risk to trust again? Is this person trustworthy? Can they become trustworthy again? I was thinking too that what Brene Brown, I've mentioned this in a prior webinar, but she has this anatomy of trust she talks about in her Braving the Wilderness. No, I think that's what it's called, Braving the Wilderness book. And she breaks down trust into several categories, and she uses the acronym Braving. She says each element is crucial to trust, to building and rebuilding of trust, or they exist inside of a trusting relationship. I thought these were so useful because I was kind of blown away, because sometimes we want to think of trust as an all or nothing. I totally trust you or I totally don't, where there's actually a lot of little areas that we want to kind of piece out. And sometimes that's painful in a relationship. An addict's trying to recover and it's all or nothing. Well, I'm doing this really good, but this is still, so sometimes we want to break it down. So she talks about boundaries being so important. We cannot have a trusting relationship without really effective boundaries. That's knowing where I end and you begin, and being able to, take care of myself and meet my needs and state my needs and say no and whatever those boundaries need to be. She talks about being reliable, such an important element of trust, that you will do what you say you're going to do every time, not just one time, but every single time you'll do that. We say a test is reliable when every single time we run the test, it comes out with the same answer. That's a reliable test. So reliability is big. Accountability is huge. So, you might be really reliable, that area. I'm learning how to trust you. You're actually following through, but I really struggle because you don't take accountability for some things. You kind of pawn it off or make excuses, or you blame me, or, so accountability is an issue. Reliability is good, but accountability, taking responsibility for myself, for my behaviors, for my actions. She talks about the V in Braving is vault. That means being a vault, holding confidence, holding the confidence of others. So I have to be able to hold, in order to have a trusting relationship, I have to be able to hold what people tell me and not go tell somebody else, and not talk about somebody else with somebody else. I mean, all of that's breach of vault, not holding. And then she talks about integrity as your I, integrity is not just saying your values and blah, 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 your values, but you actually live the values that you profess to have. So you might have good accountability, but your integrity is kind of lacking. You say one thing, but you do another. So, that's going to confuse my trust. N is being non-judgmental. In a relationship, we need to know that I'm not going to be judged for how I feel. I'm not going to be judged for asking for help or for being one down or weak or feeling like I need help. And we're not going to judge other people or another person in our relationship for being imperfect or for needing help either. And the last one is generosity. That's probably my favorite, and that's to make the most generous assumption about another person and their intentions. But we can't do that unless we have boundaries in place. Unless we have reliability, accountability. Like generosity happens when I in a really trusting relationship where I can say, well, maybe they were just doing the best they can. You know, maybe they are where they are and they're giving the best they can. I can only be generous when I've got the boundaries in place and I've got that steady. So I love that. So trust becomes not just a one and done thing. It's a very intricate thing with a lot of different areas to consider. And when you're talking to each other, whoever you're in a relationship with, even kiddos, you know, even adult kids, I've got grown-up kids, sometimes, you know, the conversation doesn't have to be all or nothing. Or maybe you have teenagers, you know, you're super good at being reliable, but dang, you really struggle with the integrity or the accountability, or, you know, you're showing up like this. You're not, you know, not exercising good boundaries or whatever. So we have language to talk about trust. So it's not just all or nothing. Another big piece in addiction is all or nothing is a thing. I'm either over here, or I'm over here. It's good or bad, black and white. It's like, oh, and here I go with my hands. Sorry, I can see my big hands in the picture.
I do the exact same thing. So yeah.
I'm actually sitting on them when I start.
No, yeah, I do this. I cross my arms a lot to do the same thing. So yeah.
But all or nothing is a thing in addiction. So swinging that pendulum, and we don't want to do that. We want to have language that can break it down, and we can start talking about the areas of trust that really need to be worked on. Because I've seen addicts that are super like accountable. They take responsibility for their behavior all the time, but their reliability just stinks. You know, they just can't they can't hold their word, and that's a problem. But boy, if we can break that down, then it's less shaming, I think, for both people in the relationship.
Well, less shaming, but also pretty tangible. It's like you go, okay, this, you know, these areas are good. This one area, you know, can we make some plans for how you could get from where you are now, which is in the basement, you know, up a couple levels, you know, and that to me would be a whole lot more doable than, you know, because trustworthy is kind of nebulous, you know, like what does that mean? Well, this is exactly what it means, and you know, here's some ways, and it isn't that I'm stuck at it completely. Okay, you know, those areas you're doing okay. But this, you really, some room for improvement. And that makes it feel a lot more attainable as well. The all and nothing, it's the grandiosity, even the grandiosity of how terrible I am. I'm so great, or I'm so horrible, but I'm great in my horribleness, you know. So definitely ends up being, you know, the all or nothing, always and forevers and nevers and are really problematic. So like, I think why we one day at a time in the program is, okay, I just need to look at this, not the, you know, the vision for forever in the future, or even looking at everything in the past. Like you want to break things down, you know, as you need to, but, you know, it just helps contain for us who struggle with all of that. I was thinking too with this question, I still have it up, but the history of lying to therapists. I want, first of all, and I'm not giving a pass, but addicts lie. And Kim has talked about it before. And I've used it so many times, Kim, because, you know, you talked about, you know, addictions in the base part of the brain, you know, the same as breathing. And I thought, oh my gosh, no wonder we as addicts are so, you know, we have to breathe. Well, we have to, you know, have our addiction. So it's really challenging, and it doesn't get to the, you know, to the thinking part, but not all therapists are created equally in this field. So, you know, I mean, this is a really specialized area. So, so it takes specialized training. And I think it's also the therapists, quite frankly, that are willing to look at their own stuff, because, you know, I know some that have lots of training, lots of letters behind their name, but, you know, still get stuck in their own stuff. So, and you know, there's countertransference, and addicts are notoriously manipulative and charming, and, you know, all of those things. So it's one of those where it's easy, and most therapists are only hearing one side, and they're, you know, and so often, and I'm not saying this is right at all, but, you know, it's like, oh, well, you know, if my partner is so blah, 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 you know, and so then it's almost the buy-in of like, what, well, you know, of course you did that, you know, so they're only getting one side of it. So a good therapist isn't going to catch everything, but it's going to help the addict learn to be honest, and because honesty truly serves us best once we get into this process. It's because it takes away, the wreckage of the past, and it takes away the trash and the shame and all of those things, once we get stripped down to that honesty. So a good therapist is going to help him get honest and accountable, and be able to be contained within himself, so that he's able to, move forward in recovery. Recovery is awesome, and most addicts can't even, especially new ones or contemplating it, can't even imagine how good recovery is. It's terrifying, because you're telling me you're going to take away my addiction, which is the only thing I know and that is, been safe in my life. I don't know how to do that. I couldn't even fathom it, and so how am I going to manage life without my crutch that I've been using? So it's terrifying, and it takes tools and it takes support, but fortunately there are tools and there are support. So he absolutely can get there with the right help. But going back, I do encourage you to get support for you too. So
Addicts are the reason why they go to groups. Like usually a lot of the therapy, even and outside of therapy, is so important. The group work the research shows that addicts heal best in a cohort, in a group of people that are familiar. It's really hard for an addict to lie to another addict, because they have the same game. They know the game. That's why it works. So they can gently, or some directly, sometimes not gently, but they can call it out too and say, yeah, man, I've tried that. I've been there. I think they're full of crap, or whatever, in a nice, loving way. But that's why, therapists, like, I expect to be lied to as a therapist. I understand, or even if it's not maliciously intended, sometimes it's just the story in the head is distorted through the addiction. So I don't expect someone's going to come in here and give me, like, lay out the whole, hey, and here's my part. And most people don't know that if they don't have any significant recovery. So that's part of my job as a therapist, is to help them navigate their own truth and their own reality. And the group on the backside, whether group, therapeutic group, support group, 12-step group, that will also help firm up those edges, and help rewire. Because you have to lie to be in an addiction. You have to lie constantly. You can't be like, hey, just so you know, I'm going to go look at pornography, or I'm going to go drink when, or I'm going to use drugs. Like, nobody does that. Those are shameful, usually hiding behaviors, because people don't like it. Your loved ones don't like it. So addicts learn to lie as part of the career of addiction. So once they quit that job, and they learn what the difference between truth and a lie, and that some of those distortions, it can get better. But again, just to reiterate what Tammy said and what we've been saying, support is everything, everything, everything in that process for both. And sometimes the lies for the partner and the family just look different. We don't, they might not necessarily lie to the therapist or other people, but sometimes it's easy to lie to themselves. Again, go to that old code of, this is my fault. I've done something wrong. I'm sick. I'm broken. I'm all that stuff. And it feels very real. And you might even get validation for that, but it is very untrue. Shame, as we say it, Brene always talks about, she does all the work on shame, is a lie in and of itself. But it feels very true because it's habitual. It's something I've learned to say to myself to cope with the crisis that I'm in at any stage of life, or my current situation. So yeah, honesty is, when somebody gets honest, and they can be just fearlessly honest, that they are on their way, even when it's hard. When they can show up to a partner and say, I don't want to tell you this, but I had a slip and this is what happened. And because I love you, and because I love me, and I care about our family, and I care about my health, I have to call myself out, no matter the consequences. If you leave, if you stay, I understand, but I have to be honest, or I might die, or I might lose everything. And that, with people, when they put in the work, that's where they get. I stop lying because the risk is too high for me. So
yeah, and for me, a lot of it was, I didn't, I was constantly in chaos, and it was in my guts, like I was constantly under stress. And so once I got a taste of what serenity looked like, and that I didn't have to constantly be, I liked it. I really actually liked it. And now, you most of the time that's where I am, even if there's kind of chaos going on in my life. Most of the time my internal is, in the serenity mode. And when it gets off, I don't like that. And if there's a relationship that's out of whack, I have to do something to repair that. Because even if I disagree with somebody or they disagree, it's okay. But I can't handle the having the discord in my life anymore. So it does get to that place where it's, like I want a life of honesty and choosing to be with people. I was thinking too, we were talking about, the support, and so often partners have family and friends who are well-meaning, but get part of the story or too much of the story, and they're like, dump him, why would you want to stay? What's wrong with you that you want to stay with him? That type of thing. It's tough because you still can see, the good in that person. You have a history with that person. You want to, you see he's trying, whatever. And so it's finding the support that's able to go, I get it. I get why you're staying in for, and like you said, if it's a good idea today, it's a good idea tomorrow. I can continue to examine, if this is for the long haul or not. But, having the ability to say to well-meaning people, I know you love me. I appreciate that, but this isn't helpful support. Here's what I really need from you. And hopefully they can show up in a different way for you. So.
Awesome. And I think too, remember, if you, a takeaway for today or a golden nugget is prodependence comes from love. It's about love. It means love. It's just loving in the right way at the right time with the right person, in a way that works best for both. So it is about love. Love is not, I think that's my favorite aspect of prodependence. Well, there's a lot of favorites, but Dr. Rob says all the time that, you can't love too much. It's just not a thing. So don't let anybody tell you that. You love because you love. You love because that's what attachment is. And there may come a time where that relationship may or may not be healthy, or you may have to grieve the loss of that, or you may have to make very difficult decisions within that love that will be helpful. But there's not a thing wrong with anybody that loves. And if there's a planet where people love too much, I want to be sent there.
Me too.
That'd be a pretty great place.
That'd be a great place. So, yeah.
All right.
Okay, I think we're out of time, and it's a great place to stop. So for those of you that joined us, thank you. Kim, as always, great to be with you on this. We appreciate your information and look forward to the Prodependence workbook that will have more of this practical application for how to move forward in a prodependent way. But yeah, for those of you that are joining us, it is all about love. So.
Yes, hang in there, you guys, and keep at it. And thank you for being here today. I'll be back in 2 weeks. I will look forward to being there and seeing you then.
Thanks, Kim. See you then. Bye-bye.